I was laying on my boat shop floor, crushing pain in my chest, when I called my son for help. He told me he was too busy with his wife's dinner party to come. That was the moment I realized my own family wanted me dead. My name is Gary Patterson. I'm 62 years old, and I spent 24 years in the Navy before opening Patterson Marine Services here in San Diego. I thought I knew what betrayal looked like after serving overseas, but nothing prepared me for what my own family would do to me. Let me back up a bit. My wife Carol passed 3 years ago from breast cancer. Toughest thing I ever went through, and that includes 2 tours in the Persian Gulf and watching good men die in places most people can't pronounce. Carol was my anchor, my voice of reason, the one who kept me grounded when the nightmares from overseas got bad. She fought that cancer for 18 months. I was by her side every single day, driving her to chemo, holding her hand through the worst of it, watching this strong woman who'd raised our son while I was deployed slowly fade away. Near the end, she was worried about me and Danny. She made me promise I'd take care of him, make sure he found the right woman to settle down with. "Gary," she said one night in that hospital bed, "Danny's a good boy, but he's soft, too trusting. When I'm gone, you watch out for him. Some women will see dollar signs instead of the man." I promised her I would. It was the last real conversation we had. After Carol died, it was just me and Danny. He's 35 now, works as a software engineer, makes good money around $140,000 a year. Smart kid, always was. Got his mother's brains and my stubborn streak. For the first year after we lost Carol, we were tight. He'd come over for dinner every Sunday, help me with projects around the house, talk about his mom. Then he met Beverly. Now don't get me wrong, I tried to like her. She's pretty enough, 30 years old, has this whole social media thing going where she posts about lifestyle and wellness. Claims to be an influencer with about 15,000 followers, which apparently means she gets free makeup samples and writes reviews for protein shakes. But from day one, something felt off about Beverly. She had this way of looking around my house like she was appraising it, asked a lot of questions about my business, my retirement plans, whether Danny was set to inherit everything. Red flags everywhere, but Danny was smitten. Beverly grew up poor in Ohio, which I respected. Hell, I grew up poor too. But where I enlisted to make something of myself, Beverly seemed to think the world owed her something. She'd complain about her struggles while wearing designer jeans that cost more than most people make in a week. The manipulation started small. Beverly would make comments about how I was too involved in Danny's life. She'd roll her eyes when I called to check in. "Doesn't your dad have any friends his own age?" she'd ask Danny. "It's weird how much he needs you." She convinced Danny that I needed boundaries because my grief was making me clingy. Before I knew it, my weekly dinners with Danny became monthly, then every few months, then barely at all. The worst part was watching Beverly isolate Danny from everyone who cared about him. His Navy buddies from when he was a kid and we'd have base barbecues, his college friends, even Carol's sister Sarah, who'd been like a second mother to him. Beverly had an excuse for why each relationship was toxic or unhealthy. "Your Navy friends are stuck in the past," she'd tell Danny. "Sarah is just jealous of our relationship. Your college buddies are immature." And Danny, poor kid, he was so desperate to make his marriage work after losing his mom that he went along with everything. He'd always been a people pleaser, but this was different. Beverly had him convinced that choosing her meant cutting ties with his old life. I started noticing other things too. Beverly had expensive tastes for someone who claimed to be a struggling influencer. Designer bags, luxury vacations to places like Cabo and Hawaii, a brand new BMW that she claimed was essential for her brand. When I asked Danny about it, he'd get defensive. "Beverly works hard on her content, Dad. She deserves nice things. Just because you don't understand social media doesn't mean it's not a real business." What I found out later was that Beverly had racked up over $60,000 in credit card debt trying to maintain her lifestyle. She was living way beyond her means, funding her influencer image with money she didn't have. But Danny didn't know that yet. Beverly was good at hiding her problems while making everyone else look like the issue. She also started dropping hints about my age, my health, how stressful it must be for Danny to worry about his elderly father all the time. Never direct, always subtle, just planting seeds. "Your dad seems so lonely since your mom died," she'd say with fake concern. "Maybe you should look into some senior communities where he could make friends his own age." Or, "I hope your dad has a good estate plan. You don't want to be stuck dealing with legal mess if something happens to him." But I kept my mouth shut. Carol always said family comes first, and I wasn't going to be the father-in-law who caused problems. I figured Danny was a grown man who could handle his own marriage. I'd given him the tools, taught him right from wrong, shown him what a good marriage looked like with his mother. Surely he'd figure out Beverly's game eventually. That was my mistake. I underestimated how good she was at psychological warfare. Last Saturday started like any other day. I was in my boat repair shop working on a 1985 Boston whaler that belonged to one of my regular customers, old Pete Martinez, who'd served on destroyers back in the day. Beautiful boat, just needed some engine work and a new fuel pump. Pete always brought his boat to me because he trusted Navy work, said we understood the importance of keeping things shipshape. I was under the hood around 2 in the afternoon when it hit me like a freight train. The chest pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt, and I've been hurt before. Took shrapnel in my shoulder during Desert Storm, broke 3 ribs in a motorcycle accident in my 40s, had my appendix out without proper anesthesia in a field hospital overseas. But this was different. It felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with a pipe wrench. The pain radiated down my left arm, and suddenly I couldn't catch my breath. My vision started going gray around the edges, and I knew exactly what was happening. Massive heart attack. I managed to grab my phone from the workbench and dial 911 first. Training kicked in. Always secure help before anything else. The dispatcher was professional, got my address, told me paramedics were en route. Then I called Danny. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. I could hear music and laughter in the background, the clink of wine glasses, people talking over each other. "Dad? What's up? We're kind of in the middle of something here." "Danny," I wheezed, struggling to get the words out. "I'm having a heart attack. I'm in the shop. I need you to come now." There was a pause. Then I heard Beverly's voice in the background, sharp and annoyed. "Who is it? Tell him we'll call him tomorrow. I'm not dealing with his drama tonight." "Dad," Danny said, and his voice had changed. Colder, more distant. "Beverly's hosting a dinner party for her business contacts. This is really important for her career. Can't this wait until morning?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked to school when the bullies were bothering him, was telling me my heart attack could wait. "Danny," I called 911, "I'm having a real heart attack. Please, son. Look, you've had chest pains before and it was just indigestion. Remember last year when you thought you were having a stroke and it was just stress? You probably just need to take an antacid and rest. We'll check on you tomorrow, okay?" Beverly's voice got louder in the background. "Danny, the photographer, is here. We need you for the group shots. Tell your dad you'll talk to him later." "Dad, I have to go. Beverly spent weeks planning this party. Take some Tums and call us tomorrow if you're still not feeling well." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, lying there on the concrete floor of my shop, and for a moment the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt in my heart. My son, my only child, the boy Carol and I had raised to be better than this, had just hung up on me while I was dying. The paramedics found me 15 minutes later. Professional guys knew their job. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I could see lights blazing in Danny's house about 2 miles away. The party was still going strong. Through my shop window, if I squinted, I could even see people out on his back deck, laughing and drinking wine while their host's father fought for his life. The next few hours were a blur. Emergency room, cardiac catheterization, emergency surgery to insert stents. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. The widowmaker, they called it, 95% blockage in my left anterior descending artery. Dr. Rodriguez, my cardiologist, said another 20 minutes and I would have been gone. "You need to call your family," he told me after I was stable in the ICU. "This was serious. They should know you're okay." I asked the nurse to try Danny's number again. This time, Beverly answered his phone. "Gary, honestly, you're being so dramatic. Danny's exhausted from hosting last night. The party went until 2 a.m. and we had to clean up. Can't you just handle this yourself? You're at the hospital, so you're obviously fine now." "Beverly, I just had emergency heart surgery. I almost died." "Well, you didn't, did you? Look, Danny and I have a busy weekend planned. We're going to brunch with some potential sponsors for my brand. Then we have a couples massage at the spa. We can't just drop everything every time you have a health scare." She hung up before I could respond. That's when I knew. This wasn't about bad timing or poor communication. Beverly wanted me out of the picture permanently, and somehow she'd convinced my son to go along with it. I spent the next 3 days in that ICU bed, alone. No visitors, no flowers, no calls. The nurses tried to be kind about it, but I could see the pity in their eyes. Janet, my day nurse, was especially sweet. Former Navy wife, understood military families. "Your son must be really worried," she said the second day, trying to make conversation. "I'm sure he'll be by soon." "Yeah," I said, staring at the ceiling. "I'm sure he will." But he didn't come, and Beverly made sure of that. On day 4, I got curious about what Beverly had been posting on her social media during my heart attack. I'd never paid much attention to Instagram before, but recovery time gives you a lot of hours to fill. What I found made my blood boil. Beverly had posted a series of Instagram stories during her dinner party, pictures of fancy appetizers, wine glasses catching the light, her laughing with guests in designer dresses. The timestamp showed these were posted while I was literally on the operating table having my chest cracked open. One video showed Beverly giving a toast to surrounding yourself with positive energy and cutting out toxic influences. Life's too short for drama. Her followers ate it up. Comments like, "You're glowing," and "So happy to see you living your best life." But the worst part was a video she posted the next morning. Beverly was in her kitchen making some elaborate breakfast, looking relaxed and radiant. The caption read, "Finally a peaceful weekend without family drama. Sometimes you just need to set boundaries with toxic people. Self-care isn't selfish. Hashtag boundaries are healthy. Hashtag peaceful vibes. Hashtag toxic free." The comments were even worse. Her followers were praising her for standing up to manipulation and not enabling bad behavior. One comment from her best friend Linda read, "So proud of you for not falling for the guilt trips anymore. You deserve peace." Beverly had actually responded, "Thanks, babe. It's so freeing when you stop letting people control you with fake emergencies. Some people never learn how to respect boundaries." I screenshotted everything. Then I started digging deeper. The more I looked into Beverly's online presence, the more I realized how deep this went. She wasn't just posting about my fake emergency. She'd been systematically building a narrative about me being a toxic, controlling father-in-law for months. Posts from 6 months ago, learning to set healthy boundaries with family members who don't respect your marriage. Hashtag growth mindset. 3 months ago, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding you back. Trust your instincts. Hashtag toxic family 1. Month ago, grateful for a husband who finally sees the truth about manipulative family dynamics. We're stronger than ever. Each post got hundreds of likes and supportive comments. Beverly had turned me into the villain in her social media fairy tale, and Danny was her knight in shining armor for choosing his wife over his controlling father. But the real revelation came when I found her private Facebook group, something called Dealing with Toxic In-Laws. She'd posted in there the day after my heart attack, "Ladies, I need advice. My husband's father faked a medical emergency during my business event last night. Classic manipulation tactic to ruin important moments. How do I help my husband see this pattern? He's starting to set boundaries but still feels guilty." The responses were exactly what you'd expect. Dozens of women sharing their own stories about manipulative in-laws, praising Beverly for standing strong, offering advice on how to help your husband see the truth. One comment hit me like a sledgehammer. "My therapist says elderly parents often create medical drama when they feel their adult children pulling away. It's textbook narcissistic behavior. Stay strong." Beverly had liked that comment. That's when I knew I needed professional help. Not the kind those women were talking about, the kind that comes with a private investigator's license. I called Terry Wilson, a guy I'd served with in the Gulf. He'd gotten into private investigation after leaving the Navy, specialized in financial fraud and infidelity cases. Good man, thorough, discreet. "Gary," he said when I explained the situation, "what exactly are you looking for here?" "The truth, Terry. I want to know who Beverly really is, what she's really after, and how deep this rabbit hole goes. You sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth hurts worse than the lie." "Terry, I'm 62 years old. I just survived the Widowmaker, and my son hung up on me while I was dying. I can handle the truth." It took Terry 2 weeks to put together a complete picture, and what he found was worse than I'd imagined. Beverly wasn't just some struggling influencer living beyond her means. She was a professional. This wasn't her first rodeo with wealthy older men and their families. Terry traced her back to Ohio, where she'd been engaged to a 45-year-old contractor named Mike Brennan. Mike had lost his wife to cancer, had 2 teenage kids, owned a successful business. Sound familiar? Beverly had moved in, started isolating him from his children, convinced him his kids were ungrateful and taking advantage. The engagement ended when Mike's daughter found text messages between Beverly and another man discussing how long they thought it would take for Mike to make her beneficiary on everything. After Ohio, there was a stint in Arizona with a widowed restaurant owner. Same pattern. Move in fast, create drama with family members, push for financial control. That relationship ended when the man's brother hired a PI and discovered Beverly was seeing someone else on the side. She's got a type, Terry told me as we sat in my hospital room going through his files. Older men, recently widowed, successful businesses, close family relationships that she can work to destroy. She studies them, learns their weaknesses, then moves in for the kill. And Danny? Danny fits the profile perfectly. Lost his mother, close relationship with his father, good income, stands to inherit your business and assets. Beverly saw him as the perfect mark, but that wasn't even the worst of it. Terry had been following Beverly for a week when he photographed her having lunch at the Hotel del Coronado with a man who definitely wasn't Danny. Richard Sterling, 58, divorced real estate developer worth about $2 million. They weren't just having lunch, they were holding hands, kissing, acting like a couple. How long has this been going on? I asked. Based on what I could dig up, about 8 months. She met him at some networking event for entrepreneurs. He thinks she's a successful social media consultant who's planning to leave her current relationship. Terry handed me a folder full of surveillance photos. Beverly and Richard at expensive restaurants, walking on the beach, going into his downtown condo together. In one photo, she was wearing a diamond bracelet I'd never seen before. Gary, there's more. Financial stuff. Beverly's been forging your signature on checks from your business account. Small amounts, nothing you'd probably notice immediately, but it adds up. About $15,000 over the past 6 months. He showed me copies of the checks. My signature, but shaky, inconsistent. Amateur work, but close enough to fool a busy bank teller. She's also been applying for credit cards using Danny's information without his knowledge. Got approved for about $25,000 in additional credit lines that he doesn't know about. How is that legal? It's not. It's identity theft and fraud. But she's smart about it. She has the cards sent to a P.O. box, makes minimum payments to keep them current, keeps the balances just under the radar. Terry leaned back in his chair. Gary, this woman isn't just taking advantage of your son's grief. She's systematically setting him up for financial ruin while planning her exit strategy with another man. I stared at the photos of Beverly with her secret boyfriend, at the forged checks with my name, at the credit applications with Danny's stolen identity. 3 years ago, I was a happily married man with a close relationship with my son. Now I was a heart attack survivor whose family thought I was a toxic manipulator, while the woman responsible was stealing from both of us and planning to disappear with her real boyfriend. Terry, I said, I need you to keep digging. I want everything. Bank records, phone records, social media messages, hotel receipts, everything. And I need it documented properly for court. You planning to press charges? I'm planning to end this. Beverly wants to play games with my family? Fine. But she's about to learn that when you target a Navy man, you better not miss. The investigation was just the beginning. What came next would either save my relationship with Danny or destroy it completely. But one way or another, Beverly's game was about to end. Within another week, Terry had enough evidence to bury Beverly 6 feet under legally. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted my son back. First, I called my attorney and financial advisor. We set up an irrevocable trust with the Navy Relief Society as the primary beneficiary. My house, my business, my savings, my life insurance, everything went into the trust. If Beverly was planning to cash in on my death, she could try collecting from the Navy. The beauty of the trust was that I could still live in my house and run my business, but legally, I owned nothing. Beverly's grand plan to inherit my wealth had just evaporated. Next, I had Terry. I compile everything into a comprehensive report. Photos of Beverly with Richard Sterling, copies of the forged checks, evidence of the credit card fraud, her social media posts, even testimony from her previous victims in Ohio and Arizona. It was a prosecution's dream package. But I didn't want to destroy Beverly through the courts. I wanted her to destroy herself. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I called Danny and told him I needed to see him, that I had some business documents to discuss about my estate planning. He agreed to meet at his house, probably thinking I was finally going to make him beneficiary of everything. I arrived with Terry, who waited in his car with a camera, just in case things went sideways. Danny answered the door looking uncomfortable. He'd lost weight since my heart attack, looked tired. "Dad, about the other night." Beverly explained everything. "You can't just expect us to drop everything every time you have chest pains. Son, sit down. We need to talk." Beverly came down the stairs then, dressed like she was going to brunch with the mayor. When she saw me, her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Gary, you look much better. See? I told Danny you were fine." I pulled out the manila envelope Terry had prepared. "Beverly, I think you should look at this." She took the envelope with that same confident smile. "What is it? Estate planning documents? Something like that." She opened it and pulled out the first photograph, her and Richard Sterling kissing outside the Hotel del Coronado. Her face went white, but she tried to play it off. "I don't know what this is supposed to be." "Keep looking," I said quietly. The next photo showed them holding hands at dinner, then another of them going into his condo together, then copies of the forged checks with my signature. Danny was looking over her shoulder, his face changing as he processed what he was seeing. "Beverly, who is this man?" Danny asked, his voice tight. "Nobody. This is fake. Your father hired someone to doctor these photos." I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording Terry had made of Beverly talking to Richard on the phone. Her voice, clear as day. "Danny doesn't suspect anything. The old man had his heart attack right on schedule. I was hoping it would finish him off, but he's too stubborn to die. Don't worry, baby. Once I get the inheritance sorted out, I can leave him and we'll be set for life." The silence in that room was deafening. Danny stared at Beverly like he'd never seen her before. You wanted my father to die?" Beverly's mask finally slipped. The sweet, caring wife disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "He was going to die anyway. He's old, he's sick, he was standing in the way of our future. I did this for us, Danny. You stole from my father. You're cheating on me. You celebrated when he almost died. I secured our future," Beverly screamed. "Do you know how much money he's sitting on? The business, the house, his Navy pension, his investments? We're talking over $800,000. And he was just going to hoard it until he died naturally." Danny looked at her with disgust. "You married me for my inheritance. I married you because you were controllable. Your father had you wrapped around his little finger, but I fixed that. I separated you from his toxic influence so we could have a real life together." That's when I spoke up. "Beverly, there's something else you should know." I handed her the trust documents. "I transferred everything to the Navy Relief Society yesterday. You won't inherit a dime from me, and neither will Danny if he stays married to you." She stared at the papers, her hands shaking. "You can't do this. It's not legal. It's perfectly legal. Ask any lawyer." That's when Beverly completely lost it. She started screaming about how she'd wasted 2 years of her life, how she deserved compensation for dealing with our dysfunctional family, how she was going to sue us both for emotional distress. Danny just watched her melt down, this woman he'd thought he loved revealing herself to be a complete stranger. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. We're done." Beverly tried to salvage the situation, switching back to victim mode, crying about how sorry she was, how she could change. But it was too late. Danny had finally seen who she really was. The divorce was swift. The prenup Beverly had reluctantly signed protected Danny from her debts, and the evidence of fraud voided any claim she might have had to alimony. She tried to fight it, but her lawyer dropped her when Terry presented evidence of the check forgery. Last I heard, Richard Sterling had also dropped her once the scandal broke. Turns out, wealthy men don't like dating women who make national news for defrauding elderly veterans. Beverly moved back to Ohio, got a job at a discount store. Her social media went quiet after that. Hard to maintain an influencer lifestyle when you're working retail and living in a studio apartment. As for me and Danny, it took time to rebuild what Beverly had poisoned. We started with weekly dinches, then I began teaching him about the boat repair business. Turns out he had a knack for engines, probably inherited it from his old man. The biggest change came when Danny's son was born 6 months later, little Jake Patterson. Beautiful kid, looks just like Danny did at that age. I'm Grandpa Navy to him, and every Sunday we work on boats together while Jake plays in his bouncer nearby. I sold the business and the big house, bought a small place up the coast in a quiet fishing village. Danny and Jake visit every weekend. We don't talk much about the Beverly years. Danny carries enough guilt about that period without me adding to it. The truth is, I'm happier now than I've been since Carol died. Beverly thought she was so clever, destroying my family to get my money. Instead, she gave me something more valuable, the knowledge that my son is a good man who can learn from his mistakes. These days I spend my mornings fishing off the pier, my afternoons teaching Jake about boats and engines. The kid's only 6 months old, but he already loves the sound of engines starting up. Sometimes people ask if I regret being so harsh with Beverly, if I think destroying her completely was too much. I tell them what my old captain used to say: you can't negotiate with pirates. Beverly was a pirate, plain and simple. She tried to steal my family, my money, and my relationship with my son. So I did what Navy men do with pirates. I sent her to the bottom. Now I'm living proof that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived, surrounded by people who actually love you for who you are, not what you can give them. And when little Jake gets old enough to understand, I'll teach him the most important lesson I know. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up when it matters, standing by each other when times get tough, and never, ever hanging up when someone you love is calling for help. That's my story. Sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up teaching you what really matters in life. The strongest families aren't built on blood or obligation. They're forged by people who choose to stand by each other when the storms hit hardest. Sometimes losing everything teaches you what was never really yours to begin with, and what you discover in the ashes is worth more than anything you thought you'd lost.